I felt like the ground beneath me had cracked open, threatening to swallow me whole. Mason. My ex. The man who had destroyed me. He stood there, just a few feet away, looking both disheveled and heartbreakingly familiar. The last time I'd seen him, he'd been wrapped around my sister, Claire, in what was supposed to be our bed. That was 1 year ago, a week before our wedding. The same week I packed my bags, walked out of my apartment, and never looked back. And now here he was, a week before my wedding to someone else, looking at me with eyes that used to make me feel safe but now only reminded me of the worst kind of betrayal. "What are you doing here, Mason?" My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling. "I needed to see you." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he had every right to show up and derail my life again. "Why?" I snapped. "Why now?" He took a step closer, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched in that sheepish way that used to make me forgive him for leaving his wet towels on the bed. But not this time. Not after what he'd done. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice soft but weighted, as if that excuse could somehow absolve him. I crossed my arms, every nerve in my body screaming for me to walk away, but I couldn't move. "Which one?" I asked bitterly. "Cheating on me with my sister? Or thinking you could show up a year later like nothing happened?" His face crumpled slightly, but I didn't care. He deserved this. "Anna," he started, his voice thick, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I've spent every single day regretting what I did to you." I laughed, cold, sharp, and humorless. "Congratulations. I hope you got a medal for all your regret." His jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought he might argue, but he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, looking at me with those eyes that once felt like home. "Please," he said. "I just need to explain." "Explain?" The word burst out of me like a gunshot. "You think there's anything you can say that will make what you did okay? You didn't just betray me, Mason. You shattered me. You made me question everything, myself, my worth, my judgment. And now you want to explain? You have no right." "I know," he whispered, his voice cracking. "But I need you to hear me. If you don't, I'll never forgive myself." I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. Part of me wanted to walk away, to leave him standing there with his guilt and his excuses. But another part of me, the part that still bore the scars he'd left, wanted to hear what he had to say. I exhaled sharply, the fight momentarily draining out of me. "You have 5 minutes," I said, my tone icy. "Say what you came to say and then leave. For good this time." He nodded, his shoulders sagging with relief, though he didn't deserve it. I motioned toward a bench tucked into the corner of the cafe patio. If we were going to do this, it wasn't going to happen where the entire cafe could watch me unravel. As I sat down, I crossed my arms tightly, more to keep myself grounded than to appear guarded. Mason stayed standing for a moment, his hands stuffed deep in his jacket pockets. He always did that when he was nervous. "Start talking," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he began, his voice hoarse. I snorted. "Right. Because cheating with my sister was definitely something that just happened." His head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine. "It wasn't like that, Anna. It wasn't planned. Don't you dare try to minimize this," I cut in, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You think I care whether it was planned or spontaneous? It happened. You and Claire made a choice. Both of you. And it destroyed me." He flinched but kept going, his words spilling out like he'd rehearsed them. "I was weak, okay? Things between us, between you and me, had been strained. We were fighting all the time, and I felt like I couldn't do anything right. Then Claire," he stopped himself, taking a shaky breath. I leaned back, my stomach twisting at the mention of her name. "Go ahead," I said, my voice dripping with venom. Say her name. She's a big part of this, isn't she? She was there, he admitted quietly. And I let my frustration with us push me into something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I blinked at him, incredulous. Your frustration? That's your excuse? You cheated on me because you were frustrated? He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders sagging further. I'm not excusing it, Anna. I'm just trying to make you understand where my head was at. I felt lost. And Claire. You don't get to pin this on me, I interrupted, my voice trembling. You don't get to act like our relationship made you do what you did. And Claire? She's my sister. She wasn't some innocent bystander. She knew exactly what she was doing. He looked at me then, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something raw in his eyes, regret, shame, maybe even self-loathing. But it wasn't enough. Not by a long shot. I hate myself for hurting you, he said, his voice breaking. I've hated myself every day since. And if I could take it back, I would. But I can't, Anna. All I can do is tell you how sorry I am. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said, my voice cracking. Sorry doesn't undo what you and Claire did. Sorry doesn't erase the memory of walking into my own home and finding you with her. His head dropped again, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sounds of the cafe buzzed around us, people laughing and chatting, oblivious to the wreckage unfolding just feet away. Finally, I stood, my legs shaky beneath me. You've said what you came to say, Mason. Now leave. He stood too, his hands hanging limply at his sides. Anna, please. No, I said firmly. You don't get to ask for anything else from me. You've taken enough. You don't get more. I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. I broke it off with Claire, he said quietly. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. Slowly, I turned back to face him. What? He looked at me, his face pale. It didn't work. I couldn't stop thinking about you. About what I'd thrown away. So I ended it with her. A bitter laugh escaped me. What, you want a gold star? You want me to forgive you because things didn't work out with her? That's not why I'm telling you, he said quickly. I needed you to know. I needed you to hear it from me. Well, now I know, I said, my voice steady but hollow. And it doesn't change anything. He looked like he wanted to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked away, my steps quick and purposeful. I didn't stop until I was back at my car, gripping the steering wheel as tears blurred my vision. I thought I was over this, over him. But his reappearance had reopened wounds I thought were long healed. I couldn't let him do this to me. Not again. Because in a week, I was getting married. And nothing was going to ruin that. The days leading up to my wedding passed in a blur of final fittings, seating charts, and small crises that only weddings seemed to conjure. But beneath it all, Mason's reappearance simmered like a low-grade fever. I didn't tell anyone he'd shown up, not even Daniel, my fiancé. He deserved my full focus, not the ghosts of a past I'd worked so hard to leave behind. But as I stood in front of the mirror on the morning of my wedding, smoothing the delicate lace of my gown, I couldn't ignore the tightness in my chest. I looked at my reflection, searching for the version of myself I had been before Mason, before Claire. She seemed like a stranger now, someone more naive, less guarded. But the woman staring back at me was stronger, harder in ways I hadn't wanted to be but needed to survive. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called, my voice steadier than I felt. Rachel peeked her head in, her face lighting up when she saw me. Anna, you look stunning. I tried to smile, but it faltered. Rachel's expression shifted instantly. Hey, she said, stepping inside and closing the door. What's wrong? I shook my head, waving her off. Nothing. Just pre-wedding nerves. Her sharp eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me. You've been off all week. What's going on? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Mason showed up. Rachel froze, her mouth falling open. What? When? Last week, I admitted. He came to the cafe and said he wanted to talk. That he regrets everything. Are you kidding me? She snapped, her voice rising. That asshole thinks he can just stroll back into your life now? A week before your wedding? What did you say? I told him to leave, I said quickly. But he said he broke it off with Claire. Rachel rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might stick. Oh, well, isn't that convenient? Like that fixes anything. I sighed, sinking onto the small sofa by the window. I know. I told him it didn't change anything. But seeing him again. Rachel sat beside me, her hand firm on mine. Listen to me, Anna. He doesn't get to live rent-free in your head. You're marrying Daniel. He's everything Mason wasn't, kind, steady, loyal. He's your future. I nodded, her words sinking in, but the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. Hours later, I stood at the back of the church, clutching my bouquet as the music swelled. The double doors opened, and all eyes turned to me. I should have been focused on Daniel, standing at the altar with that soft smile that always made me feel safe. But halfway down the aisle, I saw him. Mason. He was sitting near the back, his face a mask of regret and longing. For a second, my steps faltered, my grip tightening on the bouquet. Rachel's words rang in my ears. He doesn't get to live rent-free in your head. I straightened my spine and forced my gaze back to Daniel. I could feel Mason watching me, but I didn't care. This day wasn't about him. It was about me. About us. When I reached the altar, Daniel took my hand, his eyes searching mine. You okay? He whispered. I smiled, and this time, it felt real. I am now. The ceremony passed in a haze of vows and promises, and when we were announced as husband and wife, I felt lighter than I had in years. As we exited the church, the crowd spilling out into the sunshine, I caught a glimpse of Mason standing off to the side. I broke away from Daniel for a moment and walked toward him, my heart steady for the first time since his return. You shouldn't have come, I said, keeping my voice low. He nodded, his face pale. I had to see you. One last time. Well, you've seen me, I said firmly. Now go. And don't come back. I'm done with you, Mason. I deserve more than what you ever gave me. I deserve this chance to be happy, and you don't get to ruin it. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then he nodded. You're right, he said, his voice breaking. I hope he gives you everything I couldn't. Without another word, I turned and walked away, back to the man who stood waiting for me with open arms. Mason's shadow faded behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. As we drove away from the church, tin cans rattling behind the car and cheers echoing in the distance, I leaned my head against Daniel's shoulder. He laced his fingers through mine, and I felt the weight of the last year start to dissolve, piece by piece. You've been quiet, he said softly, his eyes flicking to me as he navigated the winding road toward our reception. You okay? I turned to him, my chest tightening with emotion. Daniel deserved honesty, and he'd earned every bit of my trust. Mason came to see me last week, I admitted, my voice steady but quiet. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel, his jaw tensing. What did he want? To apologize, I said. To tell me he regrets everything. He said he ended it with Claire. Daniel didn't respond right away, his focus locked on the road. But I could see the thoughts swirling behind his calm exterior. Finally, he said, do you still have feelings for him? No, I answered without hesitation. What I felt for Mason, it's gone. What he did, who he became, that's not someone I could ever love again. Daniel's grip on my hand softened, and he exhaled slowly. Then why does he still bother you? It was a fair question. One I'd been wrestling with since the moment Mason showed up. Because he made me doubt myself, I said after a moment. When he betrayed me, it wasn't just him I stopped trusting, it was my own instincts, my own worth. He shattered more than my heart. Daniel pulled the car to the side of the road and turned to face me fully, his eyes searching mine. Anna, you are the strongest person I know. What Mason did says everything about him and nothing about you. You've rebuilt yourself from the ground up, and if he can't handle seeing the incredible woman you've become, that's his problem. I blinked back tears, his words sinking into the deepest parts of me. I love you, I whispered. I love you too, he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. And we're leaving all of this behind. Together. The reception was a blur of music, laughter, and joy, a celebration that felt like the perfect start to a new chapter. But it wasn't until the honeymoon, when Daniel and I were tucked away in a cozy villa overlooking the ocean, that I truly began to feel the weight of the past lift. One night, as the waves crashed outside and the moonlight spilled into the room, I took a deep breath and pulled out a small box I'd brought with me. What's that? Daniel asked, his curiosity piqued. I opened it, revealing a delicate necklace with a charm shaped like an anchor, something I'd bought for myself in the months after Mason and Claire's betrayal. It's a reminder, I said, holding it up to the light. That I don't need anyone else to keep me grounded. I can do that for myself. Daniel smiled, his hand brushing mine. And I'll be right here to remind you if you ever forget. As he clasped the necklace around my neck, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. Mason and Claire were a part of my story, but they didn't define it. This was my new beginning, one built on love, trust, and the strength I'd found within myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.